Mate, Stefano leaving the Tigers. Tigers press release on Monday confirmed that Stefano will leave the club. CEO Shane Richardson told the Telegraph the club want people that are in for the fight. The Daily Telegraph reported yesterday that the Tigers offered Uto Ikamanu $800,000 a year, 5 seasons, with Canterbury and Melbourne lodging lesser offers. Around $700K. Now, that's all just reported, guys. That's not confirmed or locked in. That's just a rough area of where he's going to land in regards to pay, whether it's a $900 to $700K mark. The same report claims that Illawarra and Canberra, who initially chased Stefano, were preparing an offer of $900,000 a year. Also, Shane Richardson was quoted saying that they're in a crocodile role at the moment. We've been discussing this in the green room before the show. We're actually unsure.
Have you got the definition for a crocodile roll for me, please, Kempy? Because I was asking you pre-show, mate.
Okay, here we go.
Because he rolled with it about 4 or 5 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's definitely the mantra now at the Tigers, the crocodile roll.
I wonder, like, crocodiles and a tiger, who wins in a fight? Because, you are a tiger. You could have used a tiger.
True. But if the crocodile's rolling, I think he's going with the crocodile.
So crocodilians, including the alligator, perform a spinning maneuver to subdue and dismember prey. The spinning maneuver, which is referred to as the death roll, involves rapid rotation about the longitudinal axis of the body. So I'm unsure as to, are the tigers the one currently being crocodile rolled, or are they the crocodiles rolling someone else?
All I know is that Stefano isn't doing any rolling of any sort. He wants out of the crocodile roll.
Oh, he's done.
He's gone.
Not a big crocodile guy.
No, he's not a big crocodile roll guy, Stefano. So,
okay. I'd love to know. Richo, reach out. Call in 1300 01 1170. Are you the crocodile roller or rollee?
Can we get the listeners to call in as well or text us in? Tigers fans, are you willing to roll with the crocodiles as well? Are you willing to get low and roll with the crocodiles like Richo is asking players that want to be there? And obviously Stefano's not one of them. He's going to be moving on. You read out the reports there with regards to, it seems like the Dogs have hit the front. They look like they're a prime candidate to pick him up. They're playing a very different style of footy this year because of the forward pack that they have, having a smaller forward pack with the likes of Max King, Josh Curran, these sort of guys who have been playing up front. Probably the biggest guy is the rookie, Sam Hughes. So they've always been looking for anytime a front row has hit the market, they've been a team that have been tossed up. So it does make a lot of sense. I know the Storm have been keen on Stefano for about a year now, ever since they were made aware of the
Storm
contract
have been keen
clause
on a big boy for a while now. They went pretty hard after Tino before he signed his long extension with the Titans.
Yep.
And now they're going after Stefano. And I guess that is one part of the Storm's pack. I know Nelson is considered a big body, but outside of Nelson, they've got good battler forwards like Kamikamitha and Welsh, but not necessarily an explosive front rower that can play, 40, 50 minutes. So the Stefano one's really interesting because and guys, we'll get to the Blaize Talagi news as well and the Toto news because, absolutely massive, massive news that will send shockwaves throughout the transfer market. The interesting thing about Stefano that I get a bit frustrated at is that, with a lot of young players, guys that analyse the game or girls that analyse the game, they go, 5 years ago it was like, I can't believe Luke Brooks has just taken $1 million and battling away at the Tigers. Why doesn't he go to a better club on lesser money to prove himself? So Stefano, as a young forward, makes the decision of, you know what, I'm going to take less money to go to another club to be the better version of myself that I can be, because currently in this environment, I'm not getting... And then all of a sudden, now it's, how come you don't stay with the battling club? You're not going to stay for the battle. It's like the players can't win. In one instance, it's like, you're just staying there because you're a big fish in a little pond.
Yep.
And then when you leave, all of a sudden you're a little fish in a big pond and you're not willing to stay with the battler side. It's like either way, you're getting... getting back.
Lose. In a situation like this, right? And I'll give you an example with the Luke Brooks situation. So Fox League did a post the other day about all the players that hadn't played finals yet. And it's obviously Brooksy's right up the top. And I, write a comment off the back of it. It shows, the perseverance that he's had to continually fight through for, close to 10 plus years. Not play finals footy, still keep backing up and going again. One of the comments straight away, and I knew it was coming, must be. I think he would have felt all right because he was on $1 million per season for all those years.
Yeah.
For those that aren't aware, this is, the players get paid a lot more, and Luke Brooks got paid more than I ever would have dreamed of during my career. But 3 losses on 200,000 compared to 3 losses in a row on 500,000 or even $1 million, they still feel the same.
Oh.
And when you add all of them up and compound all of those into not only losing 3 games, but losing 3 seasons, multiple seasons, and not playing finals. I do have some sympathy for Stefano. I do have some sympathy for the Tigers, though. And my sympathy towards them is I feel like they're starting to get some of the things right that I had my dramas with for a long time at the club. I think Shane Richardson is the right guy. I like, we took the mickey a little bit out of the crocodile role there, but a lot of his messaging, I've liked a lot of it since he's arrived. I like that he's in unison with Benji. I still want to give Benji a full 2 years before, similar to what Cameron Ciraldo got at the Dogs for me, when people were calling for, the Bulldogs fans were calling for his neck early on when they weren't getting results immediately. It's like, hold up, let's give him at least 18 months before we judge him on that. So I guess that's the frustrating part for me for the Tigers. But I can see both sides in it. If I'm Stefano and I'm looking at examples of 2 guys that are at the team that I follow now, and Tommy Talau and Luke Brooks, and then also down south with Sean Bloor at the Melbourne Storm, I'm thinking, am I getting the best out of myself here at this club? Or I'm looking at those guys who look like they are playing so much better and so much more consistently than they were at the Tigers last year.
Well, look, I think it's a bit mixed messaging from the Tigers, though, because, it was an open secret that they were over in England, 2 months ago, basically saying we're shopping our players around. So it's like, on one hand, when you want the player, it's, we only want players that are here for the battle. On the other hand, you're literally currently shopping players around. And it's just like, as I said, I understand how it might be disappointing for the Tigers. But at the end of the day, like, the reason why they're in this mess is because of what they've done over the last few years as an administration. Like, I don't blame Stefano at all. He has been there for, 4 or 5 years now? Now, also, like, I understand the argument where people go, well, Stefano hasn't been the best player on the field each week at the Tigers, so why is he such a hot property? I get that. I do, because you compare it to, say, a Payne Haas, and you go, well, Payne Haas at the Broncos, when the Broncos were struggling, he was always the best player on the field.
Yep.
But in saying that, like, at the Tigers, who has really played their best rugby league over a long period of time in the last decade at the Tigers? Like, has anyone... Like, you even look at a guy like Dream Buller, killed it last year, relatively quiet this year. Guy like Galvinus came out, he's played really well this year. Even he had some issues and wanted to leave early this year.
Yep.
And so, I don't know, people that are trying to project that the problem is the Stefano rather than, it's actually, in my opinion, the Tigers. They're the ones with the problem that needs to get sorted rather than Stefano, which they are doing. I do believe Shane Richardson, his pedigree, his resume is incredible. And I do like a bullish leader that is willing to, at the very least, come out and have interviews and let the fans know how he feels about certain things. I do think sometimes with clubs that are struggling, when you have a CEO in the background that you don't really hear from them, you don't really know what's going on, it can be hard as a fan to kind of engage. What I like about Richo is that whether you agree or disagree with what he's saying, at least he's saying something. At least he's giving the fans something to kind of go, okay, we've got to, we can latch onto that. We've got a direction. We've got a purpose. I do think that the Jerome Luai, we all look at the negative things that the admin at the Tigers have done recently, but the positive thing is Jerome Luai, they signed him, 12 months ago? I mean, he's probably added an extra $300,000 or $400,000 onto his contract over the last 12 months. That's been an incredibly shrewd signing by the Tigers.
Yeah. Well, look, you could argue that now he is playing to the value that they signed him at.
Yeah.
Right? I think a lot of people were looking at that contract to begin with, and it was more of a projection because the answer that we all wanted, that we thought we might not see until next year was, can Jerome Luai play 7 and control the team? Because every time Nathan's been out, they've had guys that have filled in, like Jack Coggo, like Sean O'Sullivan, that have played that role at the Penrith Panthers. I love the fact that he got to play it this year, and he probably played his best footy. He's having a career best year.
Easy.
And now that money, even though I still like the contract regardless, because I could see the projection, I could see why they were paying to get a player not only of that talent on the field, but also to rebuild the culture that's desperately needing some leadership, like Stephen Crichton, what Stephen Crichton has done at the Bulldogs. I was always a fan of the contract. Now I love it even more after the Origin series. I love it even more after the time that Jerome played at 7 during the Origin series for Penrith. And I love it even more if he can convince his mate on the wing.
Which we'll get to.
Which we'll get to in a bit, who has Ream reported, that he's a bit unhappy at the moment. It would be unders. If he can manage to somehow convince his mate to come over, the contract that he is on now would be unders, and we'll get to that a little bit later on.
I'll tell you what, the Jerome Luai, the initial $1.2 million, reportedly, again, or reportedly, not 100% confirmed, but let's just roll with that number. The initial price, that was a market pressure price. That was, we're a desperate club. We need a guy that's experienced in winning premierships. On the market right now, there's probably not that many players. Jerome Luai fits the bill the most to what we need right now. Whereas if you're a top-tier club, you probably wouldn't pay $1 million at the time for Jerome Luai. This past 12 months has proven even a top-tier club would probably pay about $1 million for Jerome Luai.
100%.
Because he has literally at the tippity top of the game in New South Wales delivered in something that, even at the moment, Cleary hasn't delivered such a performance in such a big moment. Not to suggest that Luai is a better player than Cleary, but at the end of the day, in the big moments, he's delivered. And so what I love about, and the Tigers deserve a massive rap, is that, we always jump on them when they do the wrong thing and they sign players for overs and the contract is a bad contract. We need to applaud them when they did the shrewd thing and they saw something in Luai a lot of us didn't see. Because when they signed him for $1.2 million, I was like, I didn't see him as a 7. I was like, I don't see him as a player that can lead a team around. But clearly the Tigers had seen something that we hadn't, because I just didn't see it. The last 12 months, there's an argument to be made he's a better 7 than 6.
Yeah, well. There was only a short example of it, was playing for Samoa, where he controlled that team. And I just seen enough. The one thing, we've sort of gone a little bit off topic with Stefano here and gone to Jerome. But the one thing, the one reason I thought Jerome has always deserved a lot more praise is the lack of ego, because everyone always talked about when Jerome and Nathan were coming through, Jerome was the guy. And Nathan was a slow build. And then obviously Nathan became Nathan and completely controlled the team. But Jerome was the guy and controlled a lot of the footy in the juniors. Then he gets to a point where obviously Nathan goes to a whole new level, and that system is so good, and he's not getting credit for three consecutive grand finals.
Well, not only is he not getting credit, he's getting your nothing without Nathan. He grew up getting told, he grew up going, I'm the man, and Nathan's my sidekick. Now, all of a sudden, he's getting told, you're actually nothing without Nathan Cleary.
What about the grand final? The grand final, he goes off. He carries that shoulder injury. Anyone else, that's as tough as it comes. No one gives Jerome credit for that. No. He struggles to finish the game, and then everyone just keeps raving about, it was all Jack Cogger.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So this whole 3-4 year period that the Panthers have been really good in, he's had to, for the way that everyone perceives him, he's got probably less ego out of anyone in that team in the role that he's played there. So again, we're obviously big fans of Jerome, and again, this is sort of the frustrating thing for me if I'm a Tigers fan, and from an outsider looking in and wanting the Tigers, because I don't like seeing teams stay down the bottom for as long as they are. So I want to see the Tigers.
Well, how good's it been the Bulldogs?
So good.
Yeah.
Even the Dragons, mate.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed watching the Dragons this year as well.
Yeah.
And that's why I was like, Steph, could you have waited a year? But again, he's been inside those 4 walls now for 3 or 4 years, so he's seen all the going ons, and he's made a decision, and good on him. Whatever he decides, I'll be happy for him, and he's going to get paid. He's going to get paid accordingly, because despite what everyone thinks about him, he does have the potential to become a top 10 front rower in the competition.
Yeah, just quickly with that, before we head to a break, for a lot of listeners, when you see the $700,000, you have to remember the salary cap went up 25%. So that is like a $500,000 player in the old salary cap. And it'll take us a few years to adjust to that. Remember when we started seeing $1 million players and we were all sitting there mind-blowing going, you are like, there's only one player worth $1 million. His name's Nathan Cleary. So just for the audience listening, 700K is like 500K in the old salary cap.
Yep.
So Stefano on 700K is even if you are paying on potential, is a bloody good buy, like a bloody good buy. We're going to head to a break. After break, we'll finish off as to where we think Stefano will land. Blaize Talagi, To'o, plenty of other players looking to enter the transfer market. Meaning 2024 will be his final season with the Parramatta Eels CEO. He said the club made a very strong offer to Blaize, provided a clear path for his football future, and consistently made it clear to Blaize and his family that we wanted him to be part of the club long term. While we are disappointed, particularly given the opportunities provided to Blaize during his time at the club, we wish him all the best. Look, I can understand Eels fans being a bit disappointed. I can also understand Blaize going, the club's not in the best position right now. A new coach is coming in. I got a good offer. I think this is almost just like both parties didn't really work out, go their separate ways. I don't really feel like there's any kind of villain in this scenario or someone's done anything egregious or wrong. It's not like he's breaking contract early. He's doing everything by the law, young Blaize. And also I can respect the Eels by not having to, like the fact that it took this long for this decision to happen suggests to me that Blaize was potentially asking for a bit more money or a specific position, because otherwise, why would it take this long? The decision would have been made earlier. So I can understand, Blaize probably wanting more money, but understanding that the Eels have got money tied up in their key positions, and also they've got their key positions most likely sorted. And I can also understand the Eels going, you know what, unfortunately, we just don't have the cash to spend on an outside back right now, especially when we just bought Zach Lomax. So I don't think there's really any villain in this scenario, and I think it's both parties have handled themselves pretty well, and I'm excited to see where Blaize ends up.
Yeah, it's quite a tricky one, isn't it? He's a young guy who has shown some real signs of potential for the Parramatta Eels, but he's still so green, so early in his career. He's still so young. So the Parramatta Eels are in a really tricky position for all those reasons you mentioned. Pardon me. They've got so many. They're very top heavy, and due to the success of the year that they had in 2022, during that period, up the likes of Dylan Brown and Mitch Moses in particular. Those are the two main guys. They sort of found or were able to get a player of talent in Jermaine Hopgood from Penrith Panthers. And then there were guys in the front row and in the middle, Big Junes, Regan Campbell-Gillard. Gutho was ready done up until that point on a very significant back-ended contract, which goes up a percentage. A lot of these players have percentage contracts. What's the name for that? They've got a name, the specific
ratchet.
name. A ratchet, yeah, a ratchet clause. So it's a really tough one. I gather for sure that they would love to have kept Blaize, because there have been moments in games where you're like,
yeah, you can see it.
This kid's got something. But there are a number of other teams that are struggling in the outside backs, and pretty much it was all but done, it seems like, when they signed Zach. And Zach now looks like he's another player. At the time, people were like, oh, he's getting paid pretty good money coming from the Dragons. They haven't been that successful. Now that contract looks great after the back of his Origin series.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they can't keep Blaize.
And I think also, from Blaize Talagi's perspective, they're on the bottom of the ladder. I think we get a bit, we're getting a bit, when you say, Blaize, you've got this great halves pairing, you've got this great fullback to learn off, which I do believe that is true. But the reality from Blaize's perspective is if the club is saying to him, we're a really good club, and that's why you should take a little bit less than what you can get elsewhere, in reality, it's like, well, hang on a sec. Let's say there's a club right now that that can pay me essentially the same, but is a top 4 club, because there's now whispers that there's Penrith that are involved. You always got the Roosters that would have money in the salary cap. So if from Blaize's perspective, you're probably sitting there going, well, look, if I'm going to sign a contract that's unders, why wouldn't I go to a club that's actually at the top of the table rather than a club that says that we have the roster to be at the top of the table? And I think that's really hurt the Eels this year, is the fact they've gone so poorly. I believe that, let's say they had a year where they made the 8, I reckon Blaize probably does stay. because it's more appealing. Whereas at the moment, they've got a new coach coming in, they're bottom of the table. And so, yeah, the weight of we're a good club, therefore you should take unders because we've spent our money elsewhere in certain positions, just doesn't hold that much weight in reality. And so I can understand if that is the reason. I will say from the Eels' perspective, though, I am glad that they didn't. If this is the case where he was demanding a lot, like a starting fullback role with starting fullback money, I actually think it's pretty smart from the Eels to go, you know what? No, we've got some proven players in key positions like Gutho, also Zach Lomax as well. Like, Lomax.
That's true.
You know what I mean? Like, you've got a Zach Lomax coming to the club on about 650K reportedly, which is unders to what you get now. And so they're probably going, look, as talented as Blaize is, he's extremely talented. We can all see that. He still hasn't really achieved anything in the game. Whereas Zach Lomax has gone into Origin, done what he did. Gutho has played in Origin. And so I can understand why the Eels also stood firm in that contract negotiation.
And going back to Blaize specifically too, when you're in these sort of situations and, the club is going to you, look, we really want to keep you. We don't have the money right now. We could be able to fix you up on the back end. Sometimes players stay around if their gang's there. Yeah. Like you think about the crew that he's come through with. Matt Arthur has been given an opportunity to look elsewhere due to family reasons, which I applaud from all camps.
Yeah.
A very unique situation which happened with his old man, Brad. And the other one is Ethan Sanders, another guy who he come through. Blaize, Ethan Sanders and Matt Arthur, they all come through together in the Parramatta Juniors and were quite successful from what I'd seen. And, two of his probably best mates are not going to be a part of the squad as well. So if you are going to indeed take unders, that's probably a little bit more appealing if you know that you could potentially come through with your crew and then at the back end make up the money that you might have missed out on at the front.
Yeah. So as I said, I can understand both parties. I can understand Blaize looking at it and go, look, if I'm taking unders, I'll go to a top tier side currently. And I can understand the Eels going, look, we've already got an Origin outside back in Zach Lomax. We can't afford to put more money into that kind of position. So I think that I cannot wait to see where Blaize ends up. I think where Blaize does end up will probably tell us more as to what his thought process was.
Yeah, that's fair.
If he ends up at another bottom tier club and he plays starting fullback next year, I think you'll probably think, okay, he got a pretty decent offer, pretty decent contract. If he ends up at like Sydney Roosters or the Panthers, he's probably taking unders to go, you know what, I want to win premierships. I want to be the best I can be. Some audio here of Greg Alexander says the Panthers will not release To'o.
The story seemed to grow legs through the day. And I saw the Channel 9 because I was watching the Olympics. Now, the reported unhappiness or not happy with remuneration, which means money, is certainly news to the club. I'm part of the recruitment and retention committee. Brian To'o's name has not been raised in terms of, let's shop Brian To'o around. That has not happened, not a mention. Now, the club, Matt Cameron will obviously speak to Brian and his manager today, but he is contracted to the end of 27. There won't be any early release for Brian To'o, under no circumstances. As a club, we'd be disappointed if the NRL's anti-tampering rules were being abused.
There you go, Greg Alexander. He'd be the person to know what's going on. It's a very interesting situation because To'o, Danny Weiler's tweet on Monday sent rugby league social media into raptures. Panthers CEO came out, denied the report along with obviously Greg Alexander. But Penrith will still meet with To'o's management on Wednesday morning to clear the air over the winger's future. So I guess it's one of those hard ones because you can listen to the audio from Greg Alexander and you can read between the lines and you go, well, you said you releasing him hasn't come up in conversation. But so you can do all that. But at the end of the day, you've just got to... Greg Alexander has said the club is absolutely, not going to release him. They haven't heard of it. You have to believe that at face value. And you also have to believe, anything else that comes from an official at Penrith at face value. Because otherwise, you're just making things up and speculating. But I do think it is very telling now that they are meeting with the manager. That would suggest to me that maybe it has come from To'o or the management that he may be a bit not satisfied with the amount he's on. It's a very weird one because when it first came out, I was like, that is crazy talk. The best winger in the game, and in my opinion, at the very least, the top 3 wingers of all time and arguably the greatest winger of all time in Brian To'o. That's how high I have him in my category of winger. There's no way they'd release him. But then when I heard the figure that he's on $675K in this new salary cap, that's when I was like, oh, okay. Now there might be a sticking point where Brian To'o, can you please get his age? I think he's around 25, 26. So he's probably, he wants to probably be making the big bucks sooner rather than later. It's not like he's 25, so it's not like he's a 21, 22.
25.
Yeah, so
it feels like he's been around for 10 years.
I know, it's crazy. Look, isn't it? It's an interesting one because when a player is underperforming and on a big contract, the club is more than happy to say, mate, you go and find another club. Now, if it is true that the management is meeting Penrith, it seems that a player is saying, I am playing, at least $300,000 or $400,000 above what I'm currently being paid. Then all of a sudden, it's an issue. I do find that always interesting. It's usually the club that has the power in these situations. But what's your thoughts on the situation?
Yeah, I can understand Brandy if he's part of the retention, recruitment and retention decisions that need to be made at Penrith. Not discussing Brian To'o if he's on 670 or if it's reported that he's on 650, 675,000 because they are well and truly getting him on unders.
Huge unders in the new salary cap.
It's exactly what I mentioned before with young Blaize Talagi.
Yeah.
Like when you come through, you see, let's go back to that very polarising moment. We go back to the wedding speech of Jerome Loy. You've got to remember, jokes aside, with the wedding speech with Jerome, who's obviously his best man. So Bizza would have, I believe he would have signed even before Stephen Crichton had moved on. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty sure, yeah.
So, not only was Jerome his best man, but Spencer Leniu and Stephen Crichton were his groomsmen as well. So that was 3 years ago now, two and a half years ago. During that period that he's re-signed for unders to stay with his mates, they actually haven't been able to afford his mates. And now his mates are moving on. So, I can't see a world in which a guy like, Danny Wadler throws this around willy-nilly. He must have got some sort of report that there's some unease. It's probably come from To'o's camp, right? And that makes sense because if I'm looking at To'o on those figures, it feels like he's been around for 10 plus years because he's been, just like you say, the best winger now for, 4 or 5 years. He's been such a great servant for their club. You've got to take into an account the likability of a guy like Brian To'o as well. For, all the things that were thought about or said about Jerome Loy, he's been quite an enigma out there. He's been one of those, love him or hate him sort of players. With Brian To'o, I think he is just beloved league-wide, not only by players, because he's got the respect of all the players, because he plays the right way, and he doesn't carry on like a goose in any way. And then it'd be very hard to find a fan that dislikes Brian To'o.
I've never seen a fan write a negative comment about Brian To'o.
Yeah, and that just doesn't happen.
That's insane.
Considering they've won 3 competitions in a row. We love to hate. That's the the tall poppy syndrome that we talk about here in Australia, and we like our athletes to be humble, and we don't like them when they get too big. And if they do, we bring them down. No one does that with Brian To'o because he's always carried himself the right way. And
in regards to value, in my opinion, he's worth $1 million in this new salary cap.
I agree.
He's worth $1 million. And people go, that's insane. Again, guys, I have to reiterate, the salary cap has gone up by 25%. So that would be like Brian To'o being paid $750,000 in the old salary cap. Brian To'o right now in this era is the only winger worth $1 million.
I agree.
Because the stats that he puts up every single week are better than every single front rower in the game, essentially. When it comes to meters, if it's not, it's very close to the best. Then you've also got his incredible try-scoring ability. You've got his incredible defensive ability. You've got the fact that he's been in New South Wales' top 3 best players in Origin for at least 3 years now. I think he's worth $1 million. Now, I'm always of the mind, though, that if you do sign a contract, I would rather you see it out than break the contract. But I also do see the argument of if Panthers are smart. They're clearly smart. They've won 3 premierships.
Yep.
But I do think that if he goes to them and says, guys, I want an upgrade, I think they should give it to him.
I think they should too. This is a really unique case where
Very unique.
for the most part, I agree with you. I would love to see players. More often than not, I lean towards players playing out their contract. Unless you're on dramatic overs, just like when players are on dramatic overs, or it's perceived they're on dramatic overs, that clubs go, no, this isn't working for us.
Yeah.
Can we find another club for you?
Yep.
Can they play a portion of the contract? Brian Toto, if that is indeed correct, the figure that you've said, 650, 675 mark, it's way too low. And in my opinion, the reason he would have taken that low of a contract even to begin with, because he has always been this dude now for the last 2 or 3 years. He was this guy before. Granted, he's gone on and won probably 2 extra premierships, and then, all the stuff that you talk about with regards to New South Wales, and then obviously playing for Samoa as well. He's on 2 far unders now, and I think there's a respect factor in here from the Panthers where, they come to an agreement. I think this gets sorted out. I think this is just a bit of, we're looking around. Maybe Brian's looked at some of the contracts from some of the other outside backs or wingers that they've gotten in the last 6 months in particular, where it just feels like you talk about the spike in those contracts due to the increase in the salary cap. I can understand Brian Toto going, nah, this is too big of a gap. Like, I'm on this. I took a club-friendly contract because I love the club and they gave me a start and we've been successful, but this is too low.
Another part of it, and you alluded to it earlier and we spoke about it before the show, is that he would have signed that contract as well under the impression that he was going to be playing with Critter, Luai, Spencer Lenu, and all those boys. Now they're all gone, and whether you believe certain reports or not, Luai and Critter, there are whispers that breakup wasn't necessarily handled the best from a player's perspective. Depends who you talk to.
Yep.
But there's certain people that say Critter and Luai were very hard done by. And so when your best mates are hard done by like that, in a locker room, it doesn't necessarily get around the whole locker room, but if it's your closest mates,
if they're your groomsmen.
Exactly. You do know about it. Yeah. You do know what happened. It does hurt. Is there a world, do you think, where it's not even about the money? It's about, you know what? All my mates are gone. I might be considering going as well.
Yeah, look, I don't know Brian well enough to sort of speculate on that. I will say, just from an outsider looking in, he doesn't strike me as the sort of guy to throw his toys out of the cot over something like, it's a business decision, right? And although it probably could have been handled a little bit better, it has been very tricky balancing not only the relationships with those guys, Matty Burton, Viliami Kikau, Api Coruscant. They've had to let big names go. And that's just, a lot of players out in Penrith would have understood that.
I think
it's more, if I'm in the Brian Toto camp, I'm looking at him going, mate, there are wingers on close to $1 million right now, and you are better than not only some of the wingers on that money. You're more valuable than some of the fullbacks on that money.
Yeah. I don't necessarily think it might be the concern with Toto in regards to big players being moved on. That's business. That's business usual. I think maybe in the Critter and Luai situation, it would have been the narratives that were being put out about Luai and about Critter.
Yeah, okay.
For example, the whole yarn about Critter only wanted to play fullback, and that's why he was leaving the club. When in reality, now that time has passed, no one even talks about that anymore.
No,
clearly it wasn't true. Like that was the whole yarn.
Yeah.
Like he was getting painted in a picture that he wanted a big contract, and then he wanted to play fullback. Both of those weren't true. He was willing to take essentially as little as possible at the Panthers, and also he didn't want to play fullback. Then you had the whole Luai situation. Remember when he rocked up to training and he went home for a few days?
Yeah.
Around the Tiger situation where it got leaked out that he had agreed to certain things. So I guess that's where you could go. Maybe he wasn't happy with that. But I do agree with you. I think that once the initial hurt of that, calms down, you just go, you know what, it's a business. I do think it's probably more along the lines of, I've got another, 2025, 6, and 7 on this contract.
Yeah. When
in reality, so I'm essentially missing out on minimum $1 million cash of value in 3 years.
And also throw in, you've got to consider the way he plays footy. That's the biggest concern that we've had with the long-term contracts with Jason Tomololo.
Yeah, the physicality.
And for Sul Malawi.
Yeah.
He doesn't play like Well, now wingers are trying to mimic him
Yeah.
because he's been so successful. But what he puts through his body through and his availability as well, he's always available. Like he's always playing games. Ivan's done a good job of resting his Origin players, but you throw all of that in, like he can, I'd imagine he can only keep up this sort of level of play for the next 2 or 3 years. Father Time's undefeated. I've seen players that have been absolute animals, and then that 1 year, that one preseason, they get there and they just go, this is just becoming too tough.
Too tough.
And it's understandable, right?
Yeah.
So he's looking at it now, and during the next couple of years, if he's looking at other wingers' salaries and he's thinking that he's leaving close to minimum of 500,000 on the table going north all the way up to $1 million, then he needs to be compensated for that. And I do believe this is one of those really unique cases where I think Penrith look at that and go, okay,
100%
let's not frustrate a guy like Brian who's super popular, been super successful, plus the amount of effort and the load that he puts forward for this club. I think they find a sweet spot. I think he gets upgraded, and I'd imagine it'd get done pretty quick.
I was about to say he's getting upgraded, and it's happening quick.
Yeah.
Because you cannot replace Toto. There's not a single person in this competition that does what Toto does. I think Penrith Panthers, they are such a smart operation. They are so good at what they do, and they're ruthless when they need to be, but also they're smart. I think that, sometimes you can confuse ruthlessness with ego, but I don't think the Panthers are going to have an ego in this situation. I think they're going to realise, this guy is important to winning competitions for us. I think they upgrade him. I think it'll be done. Honestly, I'd be surprised if it's not done within the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, I agree.
I'd be very surprised because, as you said, the last thing you want heading into finals footy is the most loved man in rugby league pissed off.
Yeah.
That's the last thing you do. So I think they sort it out. And I do think it is quite a unique situation. We're not talking about a rookie that's had 2 or 3 good years and he's all of a sudden getting bigger than his boots and he's demanding too much money. We're talking about a winger that hasn't had a bad year in 5 years. And so, he's earned the right to go, hang on a sec, the salary cap's gone up, we've lost all these players, all these other guys are on minimum $800,000. I believe I should, when the clubs often ask players to go the extra mile for the club.
Yep.
Sometimes the club needs to go the extra mile for a player, and this is one of those special situations that they need.
This is a rare occasion where I think it does get done. It's very unique. It doesn't happen often. I don't think there would be any Penrith fans that would be opposed to Penrith Panthers going, look, we signed Brian at this deal because, due to respect and the circumstances, we're going to up him. There's not one Penrith fan that will be going, no, don't give him an extra 200, 300,000 a season.
Mate.
Give it to him straight away and make sure he's happy. We've got 4 premierships to win.
Yeah, I think it gets done and dusted. So don't worry, Panthers fan. I'll be very surprised. And I tell you what, if there some crazy world where he does leave, it's clearly not about the money, because I just don't think that the Penrith Panthers would allow him to.
I agree with that.
Okay, that was the good oil. Thanks to Cobram Estate, premium Australian extra virgin olive oil. After the break, Blandy reveals plans for 20-team national side. 20-team National Rugby League competition. But also, we got plenty more. We got Holmes, we got Nelson, we got Hastings, we got Bird. Plenty other people on the move. The Cowboys call him in. They say, mate, that last year of your contract, if you can find somewhere else, you should take it. Basically, I guess the way it was all set up was the manager was saying, are you going to extend Valentine Holmes for the November 1 deadline? They said, look, if you can find somewhere else, take it. He has done exactly that with the Dragons reportedly in the front seat or the box seat to get his signature. Where do you reckon Val ends up?
I think we've talked about a number of players now, and a lot of it comes back down to rumours, but I'm looking at a club as big as the Sydney Roosters, and there's too many players moving on from that situation or that team that have taken up a significant amount of the salary cap, and that's Jared Warrior-Hargraves is going over the Super League next year with his mate Luke Keary, and then you've got the 2 centres, Joseph Manu and Joseph Swaliti, that have also moved on. I can't imagine that there's not a club as big as the Sydney Roosters that would, like Valentine Holmes to me, feels like a very Sydney Roosters type signing. He seems like the sort of guy. I can understand the Dragons have an interest, and I can understand them probably being favourites because of the relationship with Shane Flanagan. That makes a lot of sense.
And the coin he'll get at the Dragons.
And the coin and the position he'll play. Like there's a world in which he goes down and goes straight into the fullback position, which would have been his ideal position before he was. You got to remember, he started on the wing, and then he started playing some fullback, and then he went over and did he did a stint in the NFL. But they had to move a few things around before they finally settled on. It was actually Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow and Scott Drinkwater that they were fighting for the fullback spot, and they said, "Val, go play centres for us while we figure this out."
Yep.
So that's probably more appealing to him if he wants to get good money and play fullback. Then Dragons would be the spot. But I can't imagine the Sydney Roosters just sitting back and going, We're missing out on all these star players. We've got an unproven rugby union convert that we're going to bring over and potentially put in the centres. They re-signed Daniel Tupou, which is a good re-signing for them and much needed with all the veteran presence that have moved on. But I don't know. Val Holmes, to me, just seems like a Rooster. I wouldn't be surprised. And then also throw in the Chad Townsend factor. Really good friends. Got business away from footy together. That's another factor that gets me thinking. That sort of links, whether you think Chad Townsend is going to be a really big part of the Sydney Roosters moving forward, just that familiarity with Chad, that could play a part for sure.
Yeah, I think with the Roosters, I know Joey Marnie's leaving. I'll be shocked if he's not back by mid-year next year. I think.
Oh wow!
I think he has that one season with Japan, and he comes back.
Okay.
I'd be very, very surprised if he's not. I think that because he's only signed a 1-year deal, I'm pretty sure, with that Japanese rugby team that he ended up going to, correct? Yeah. And so I reckon he's gone away, get your coin, come back mid-year. I don't know at all. And also like Kiri re-signs and then he announced his retirement. I don't know. It all just kind of, I think Manu might be back before mid-year. So really, I think the Suaalii replacement, I guess the question from the Roosters is do you go for, the old experienced Val?
Yep.
Or do you make a play at a guy like Blaize Talagi that's clearly on the market? I personally reckon Val ends up at the Dragons.
Okay.
I think that he did miss a couple years earning potential when he went over to the NFL, at least a year or so. And so I think that the money that he could earn in the Dragons will be exponentially because if he goes to the Roosters, what do you reckon? They probably get him for like 500, 600? Maybe 600 probably the minimum you could pay him?
No, I would expect, if I'm Val, I'm not going for anything less than I'm going to be on at the Cowboys. So either the Cowboys are chipping in, and I can't see the Cowboys doing that, or I'd expect Val to go there.
Well,
maybe
the Cowboys will have to chip in the first year, I reckon.
Okay.
Because as a club, you'd say, no, I'm not taking him for that first year unless you chip in something.
Yeah, I was having this discussion with someone yesterday about that. It's another unique situation where it's purely not to do with talent and what he produces on the field. It's a salary cap issue. So I think there's a world in which the Cowboys, are not stoked about letting Val Holmes go.
Really?
They've just,
really?
It could be.
See, I reckon it's some money compared to his form. His form hasn't been great this year.
But
and they've got
factoring in the youngsters that are coming through, right? So it's not like there are some other players around that there are probably better examples that I think of a little bit later on. But with Val, I think there's a good world in which he goes for a large portion of his contract to a team. And you're right. If it was a team like the Sydney Roosters, I'm probably thinking a 2-year deal for Val on very similar to money. But if it's the Dragons, then I think the Dragons will pay him a little bit more and then probably throw in an extra year, which, again, that'll be very hard for him to turn down.
At his age, too, because he's 30 years old now, pretty sure. So he's a bit older. Oh, man. It's the Roosters. Don't they just time things perfectly? Like the fact that there's all these guys on the market now. When a few months ago they weren't, and they need outside backs, and now there's outside backs on the market. Okay, some other guys. We've got some whispers that Hastings is reportedly signed with the Lead Rhinos Super League after being, this is from Andrew Voss, reportedly signed with the Lead Rhinos. Obviously he's not playing this week. It's Phoenix Crossland. What do you reckon there?
Yeah, it's been a tough old season for the Knights, hasn't it? And, they just haven't been able to figure out this spine all year. A big fella that I do the podcast with, Willie Mason, always says, iron sharpens iron. In some cases, I don't think that's the case. I think for forward packs and outside backs, that's the case.
Yeah.
For my spine players, I don't want any iron sharpening iron. I want to know who my guys are.
Yeah.
And they haven't had that clarity all year.
Yeah.
And that's been a problem. So you bring in a guy like Jack Cogger who come off the grand final and everyone's like, Jack Cogger, local junior, coming home. You just won a grand final for Penrith Panthers. It added all this unnecessary head noise around what the spine had just come off. You know, they went on a really deep run at the back end of last year. And also throw in the uncertainty around the hooker position, which hasn't really been mentioned too much. But when you got your club captain in Brayley, who's missed a lot of time and unfortunately been struck down with another number of injuries in back-to-back years, and then you get the development and Phoenix Crossland going on this run last year and sort of making the position himself, there's just been uncertainty around their spine all year, and it felt like they kind of figured it out. And going back to Jackson Hastings, mate, he'll be sweet over there. He'll go back over to the Super League. It suits his game to a T. Wet weather conditions, kick the corners, game manage, the confidence that he had playing over there. He's a completely he won't have all of the issues that he faces here in the NRL with the perceived dramas that's associated with him, and plus, he'll go to the Leeds team and be the guy.
Yeah.
Whereas with the Newcastle Knights, it's Caelan's team.
Yeah.
It's not his team. So he's got his whole job at Newcastle Knights is putting Caelan in the best position for them to get him over the line. I think it serves him better to just be at a team where he doesn't need that extra pressure. He'll just go over there. He'll control the team at Leeds. They'll have a game plan that's planned specifically around him, and he'll go so much better over there.
Look, the Knights' recruitment over the last few years, it's been so bizarre. I cannot understand it. You know, they got Gamble, Hastings doing really well. Then mid-year they signed Cogger. They had Lockie Miller that they brought from the Sharks. They traded one of their good young front rowers, New South Wales rep, to the Sharkies to get Lockie Miller. Then they moved Lockie Miller in. They wanted KP to play 6, but then he plays fullback. I do feel like their roster management over the last couple of years hasn't been great. And they've actually just brought in Peter O'Sullivan, I'm pretty sure, which will change quite a lot. And I think that, we're probably going to see a lot of movement around this roster in the next few months at the Knights with O'Sullivan coming there. The Hastings ones, it kind of makes sense not because of performance, but more just it never seems settled.
No.
The fact that they got all the way, they played as well as they did last year, and we were still questioning whether he would be the starting 7. That's crazy.
It was crazy. Going into the season, I was hearing reports that Jack Cogger was going to beat him out for that spot. And so, like I said, with that added pressure, external pressure, and then obviously it's internal. When you go on the run that they went on last year and were playing so well up until they failed with the injury to himself, and then obviously Caelan had that injury against the Warriors.
Yeah.
And they bowed out dramatically in dramatic fashion in the semi-final. It would have been nice to go into this preseason with that spine and go, we're the guys. The Jack Cogger one was super weird because they signed him halfway through the season and they'd already signed Will Price at the start of the season. Yeah. So I can understand the Will Price one. I could understand at the start of the year because it's all right, if you've watched some tape of Will over there, he's shown a bit of potential. We're probably going to get him on unders from the UK, and then we can develop him behind the spine that they had that had been successful. It seemed like...
And also, he's so different to Gamble as well. Yeah.
So, that made a lot of sense. The Cogger one didn't make sense.
Because he's basically Hastings. They're two so similar. Very strange. Now, the Nelson Asafa-Solomona, very weird one because you haven't really heard many quotes from Nelson. The Storm are such a well-oiled operation. You hadn't heard much from them. A few weeks ago, everything that I was getting told was he was gone. Gone. Not actually. Matter of fact, I'll go further. I reckon as far back as 3 months ago, I was getting told it's just not working out.
When he was playing New South Wales Cup and when he first got back?
Even before that.
Okay.
Even before that. But then, basically, I think, and this is a text, so that News Corp is reporting that Nelson said he was taking the media for a ride and you guys jumped it. So basically, the post that he put up on Instagram basically implying that he was leaving. So now it's looking like Nelson's staying. And I wonder, the question then becomes then the Storm probably can't afford Stefano. if they've got Nelson, because the argument behind the scenes is the Storm were trying to get a contract registered, but they couldn't unless they knew what was happening with Nelson because of salary cap. And so if Nelson's staying, then maybe that counts out Stefano, which puts the Bulldogs in the box seat. I'm still curious about this Nelson situation though, because he's been nowhere near as impactful as he has been. The minutes that he's been playing hasn't been as much this year, and I'd have to check that, but that's just from the eye test. I'd have to fact check it.
I seen one game where he played 18 minutes,
and it's just like, well, I know he's come out and said, "Oh, I put that out there. The media jumped it up." I get that, but like when you actually look at the reality is he's playing less minutes. Why is that? I want to know why that is. When he was there, when you look at their forward pack before this season, he's their main guy.
Yeah, and in this day and age. When you look at the reason we throw out the names like Stefano and this sort of money that they're attracting, it's because of you've got to have a big body.
And they're hard to find.
They're very hard to find,
yeah.
And a lot of them are on good money. And it wasn't great signs when there has to be more to it. There has to be more to it because he's playing New South Wales Cup, and it wasn't just a week, and. It took a couple of weeks, and when Craig Bellamy was asked about it, he was non-committal.
Yeah,
like he didn't want to ever declare that Nelson was going to be back at a certain point.
Well,
he looks a little bit heavier for sure. I know he's a big bopper, but he's in my opinion, he looks like he's about 5 kilos over his prime weight, which is at that weight being the biggest human in the NRL.
He's so big.
Like I don't mind sometimes when your smaller guys come back and they put on, or a half puts on, you know, 5 kilos, or even a prop that's about 100. Like if Max King come in next year at 110 kilos, I'd go, that's actually really good for Max King.
Yeah, thank you. Well done.
he could use a little bit extra.
Yeah.
But when you're the biggest player in the NRL, then an extra 5 kilos, it's
huge.
It's huge.
So, look, the good thing for Storm fans is it looks like he's staying, and the good thing for Storm fans is you're on top of the table, killing it again. Jeez, being a Storm fan must be a good life. We're going to head to a break. After break, plenty more rugby league to talk about.